You've learned so many new details about the suspect, his attorney, and this case in just the last few minutes. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Jake, so I can tell you that Luigi Mangione left that courthouse a lot calmer than what you just showed your viewers when he headed in, when he was screaming things. Different scenario when he was leaving that court hearing. He was also quiet during the beginning of this court hearing, only answering rather twice to the judge when asked questions. He said, "I do," when he was sworn in, and "yes, sir," answering the judge when he asked if he understood his right to contest this extradition. I can tell you that he was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Our reporter inside the courtroom said he had a disheveled collar. He was shackled at his hands and at his wrists. And his attorney, who you just mentioned, we have since learned, Jake, just in the last few minutes, that he has been hired to represent Luigi Mangione, that this was not a court-appointed defense attorney. And during this hearing, he, as you just heard him say, fought this extradition. He also was trying to fight, basically trying to get Mangione out on some sort of bail, saying he's got no criminal history. He can be, tracked by GPS if necessary, to which the district attorney there in Blair County basically lined some of the evidence that they have against him, including the fact that he was found with $8,000 cash, $2,000 of foreign currency, a passport, said that he was evading police for several days, was transient. So, of course, as we know, he is still behind bars, the judge denying that request for some sort of bail. And he is allowed to fight this extradition. That is his right. What we understand now happens is that his attorney, that defense attorney, has 14 days to file a writ of habeas corpus. This basically allows him to say, you know what, this is not the guy that needs to be extradited. Of course, it's a stretch, but it does basically extend these proceedings. And it also, if you think about it, gives the NYPD, gives investigators more time to sort of collect evidence, build their case against them, and then they will all be back in court to discuss next steps in this court process. Jake?
And Bryn, what more are we learning about the suspect, Luigi Mangione?
Yeah, so we are learning, the New York Times is actually reporting that his family grew very concerned about him at one point, actually filing a basically a missing persons report on November 18th with San Francisco. Now, we understand from the NYPD that he does have some ties to San Francisco. We're not quite sure of when that happened, but that is a key note. It also tracks with what we've been learning from his social media footprint, is that, he was very active on social media for quite a while, posting pictures of friends, his travels, and then sort of went dark, where people were reaching out to him wondering if he was okay. One person asked, "Are you going to honor your RSVP to my wedding?" So it did seem that he went dark for a while, and it does appear the New York Times reporting that his family also very concerned, so much so that they filed this missing persons report last month, Jake.
All right, Bryn Gingras, thanks so much. Let's bring in CNN Chief Law Enforcement and Intelligence Analyst John Miller, former NYPD Chief of Department Ken Corey, and Ellie Honig, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Ellie, let me start with you. What do you make of the fact that this defense attorney was hired, not court appointed? And also, what do you make of what we just heard from him?
Well, Jake, it means that the family has enough money to pay for a private attorney, and they've elected to do that. Regarding the extradition, it's really important to understand this is a bureaucratic headache for prosecutors, but it's not going to actually interfere with the substantive prosecution in any way. What's likely to happen now is a few weeks from now, we will have a hearing. There will be a hearing in Pennsylvania State Court. All that prosecutors have to show basically is this person sitting here in the courtroom is the same guy we've charged. It is Luigi Mangione. It's a very low burden of proof. It's a hurdle prosecutors have to jump over, but once they do, he will wind up back here in New York to face murder charges.
So, Ellie, why even do it?
Well, A, you have a constitutional right to do it as a defendant, and B, sometimes you want to buy time as a defense lawyer. You want time to investigate, and sometimes your job as a lawyer is just to put the government and prosecutors through their paces.
Ken, what is the NYPD doing as this process plays out in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so they're going to continue to do what they've been doing, right? The arrest never ends the investigation. The arrest is really only the first piece of it. There is so much more that has to be done here to get this case ready for a successful prosecution by the New York District Attorney. They are still out there collecting video. That video is all going to be scoured and ultimately stitched together into a timeline to try to show as much of the 225 or so hours that he spent in New York City as possible, to really be able to almost show the jury a movie of his movements, to successfully conclude that this is in fact the same person who's responsible for this crime. At the same time, they're continuing to test the forensic evidence. They're going to start to get DNA results back. at some point they will get a DNA sample from Mangione to do a direct comparison to any DNA that was recovered off that water bottle at the crime scene or the Kind Bar wrapper at the crime scene. And of course, they're trying to match the ballistics on the firearm that was in his possession to any slugs that were recovered and the spent shells recovered from the scene.
John, what are you hearing from your sources today as this investigation plays out with Mangione in custody in Pennsylvania?
You know, they're continuing to try, as Ken kind of indicated, to backtrack. There are gaps in the story. Of course, there's gaps in that movie they're trying to make, which would really ideally show every place he went of every minute of every day in New York City. But there are larger gaps in the story before that, which is when he went off the grid, where did he go off the grid? San Francisco seems to be a pointer there. What, if anything, did that have to do with his what appears to be self-radicalization? So they're working on that, but they have core responsibilities that hinge on this extradition, which is Pennsylvania has the gun, they have the body has the fingerprints in terms of the prisoner, also the DNA. So they may have to get warrants to travel to Pennsylvania to obtain their own fingerprints, their own DNA, to test fire that gun. Pennsylvania can't simply hand all that over to them because if this process drags out and the judge, says, produce the evidence of your crime, they can't say we lent it out. So there's a little codependency going on there, but it's all going to work because they've done this before.
Ellie, what do prosecutors in New York have to show in this case, and why charge the suspect with second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder?
Yeah, Jake, a lot of people are asking that exact question. So under New York state law, first-degree murder only applies to very narrow circumstances. For example, where the victim is a judge, a police officer, a first responder, or where the murder involves a murder for hire, or where there's torture involved in the case, or where the murder is committed in the course of some other crime, like a robbery or a terroristic act. And as far as we know, none of those features apply to the murder so far. And so that's why it seems that New York prosecutors have charged a second-degree murder. What they will have to show is that Mr. Mangione intentionally killed his victim here. And if that's proven, he's looking at a mandatory minimum of 15 years behind bars, no parole, and he could be behind bars for as long as life, depending if and when he ever does get parole.
And Ken, one of the reasons why this story is significant and we're giving so much attention to it is because of the response we're hearing from many members of the public. An NYPD intelligence report obtained by CNN notes the positive online reaction to this murder of this United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson. The intel report says, quote, based on observed initial online reactions to the shooting, including celebrations of the killing of a health insurance executive, there is a risk that a wide range of extremists may view Mangione as a martyr and an example to follow, unquote. Have you seen this type of response for a suspected murderer before?
Yeah, no, certainly not in these circumstances, right? And as was indicated, the outpouring of support is really unusual and very shocking, right? This isn't somebody who maybe is going to leverage a claim of self-defense, where you could see that there was some sympathy involved, or somebody who was being victimized, maybe with a long history as a domestic violence victim, and you could see people sympathizing with the offender there / victim. This is very, very different, and we saw that outpouring of support on social media. We see, comments really backlash against the McDonald's employee who called in the tip in the first place. So, I think that there is a fear. Anytime you have a really notorious crime that gets this level of public attention, you're always worried about, is this going to inspire somebody else to kind of do something similar?
Kara, we just heard from Mangione's defense attorney. What did he say? And take us inside the extradition hearing.
That's right. Well, we're just hearing from Luigi Mangione's attorney, Thomas Dewey. He spoke to reporters saying that he expects Mangione will plead not guilty to the gun charges in Pennsylvania. And he says when these murder charges are filed in New York, he anticipates he will plead not guilty to those as well. Here's a little bit more about what he said.
I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. So that's, like I said earlier, and I wasn't kidding around. A couple of things. If you're going to report something, report it accurately. And remember, and this is not just a small thing, the fundamental concept of American justice is the presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and I've seen zero evidence at this point.
Now, those comments came after the court hearing, but right before it got underway, our cameras captured Mangione walking from police custody into the courtroom. There was a bit of a scuffle, and he shouted words to a reporter. Take a listen to that.
Oh my God! And completely out of touch, and the insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Wolf, once inside the courtroom, Mangione entered wearing an orange prison jumpsuit. His collar was ruffled. He was shackled by the hands and at his feet. And he sat down at the table. He had a piece of paper with him that he unwrapped that was kind of crinkled. Now, he didn't speak much inside the courtroom, despite what his outburst outside of it. He only confirmed to the judge that, yes, he understood that he had a right to contest these charges. Now, his lawyer did most of the speaking. He said that they would fight extradition. He also tried to get bail for Mangione, saying that some of the evidence that was found on him, including the mask, could possibly be explained, saying maybe it was about COVID. Some of the foreign currency, his attorney suggested it could possibly have been fake, and he asked the judge to release him on an electronic monitoring bracelet. Now, prosecutors opposed that, running through the litany of evidence that they obtained, including ammunitions and a silencer. Wolf?
So, Kara, what happens next for Mangione?
So the judge set out a schedule here, giving Mangione 14 days to file briefs related to this extradition issue. He's also said that prosecutors have 30 days to submit what is known as a governor's warrant. And the district attorney in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, said that he will seek that warrant, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul said she will sign that warrant. So those papers will all come back to court. The judge would then likely schedule another hearing in this case, all as part of this effort to get Mangione back to New York to face these murder charges. Wolf?
All right, Kara Scannell reporting for us. Kara, thank you very much. Our legal and law enforcement experts are standing by. They're joining us right now. John Miller, what do you make of Mangione's attorney saying he hasn't seen any evidence that his client is the shooter and that his client will plead not guilty to the Pennsylvania charges?
I think, as my two colleagues both know, he's telling the absolute truth, because he showed up basically for a routine court appearance and has not received any of the discovery material, which would include the evidence that they've gathered. So while he's saying he hasn't seen any, he knows better than to suggest there isn't any. He just hasn't seen it.
Laura Coates, from what we've heard from Mangione's attorney, what's your sense of how he will defend this case?
Well, certainly you would expect a defense attorney to try to begin their case in the court of public opinion, one in which the court of public opinion has weighed in very strongly on this matter that probably is making prosecutors a little bit weary of what a voir dire and jury selection would look like, given the backlash towards the actual victim of this crime. And so they're going to have to go through an investigation process now. The questions really start to begin. The motive, building the case, figuring out what evidentiary details, the minutiae they're going to need. But fundamentally, he does have a presumption of innocence. But there is, seemingly at this point in time, a lot of evidence to suggest that there is more than probable cause to have made this arrest, that this is the person who is not only a person of interest, but the sole person of interest in this matter so far. And now the case for the prosecution has to be building that even further with an eye towards putting him before the court where the crime occurred, and that is extraditing to New York.
Elliot Williams is with us as well. Elliot, Mangione's attorney, as we all heard, said he was hired to represent the suspect and dodged a question about whether Mangione's family retained him. What did that tell you?
He's entitled to have representation however he gets it. Now, certainly, Wolf, if Mangione could not afford an attorney, the state would provide one for him. Now, the question of who's paying for it sometimes raises issues of bias and, is a person influenced in a certain, is an attorney influenced in a certain way based on who's paying them? I wouldn't read too much into that question. It is a fundamental right. And quite frankly, having competent representation in courts makes the system work better and work faster so that the public can be assured of justice, whatever the outcome may be.
Let me get back to John Miller. On his way into the hearing, John, Mangione shouted that something was, quote, completely out of touch. And he added, and I'm quoting him again, an insult to the intelligence of the American people. What did you take away from that? Was that a calculated move?
I mean, it could be if you think of the theatrics of that moment versus his calm entrance yesterday or his calm departure today, even after that outburst. It could be a display that he hopes may show him as an unglued defendant with mental health issues that maybe would not be fit to stand trial. But if you look at it just a different way, if you read his 3-page letter where he talks about corporate executives as mafiosi who have gotten away with it too long, parasites that have it coming, that this murder is something that had to be done, there's a lot of anger there and a lot of personal belief, deep, passionate personal belief that he is right and if you accept the note as evidence, all-powerful and justified to take human life. So one would denote there's a lot of anger going on.
Yep. And Laura, the district attorney there in Pennsylvania laid out in court today some of the evidence against Mangione, including a forged license, a gun, a silencer and ammunition, thousands of dollars in cash. How strong is the case against him?
All of what you described is what is a nightmare for a defense counsel, to be able to suggest that their client should not be the person of interest. If you're the prosecution, you're looking at all these different aspects of it. You are weaving this story already in your mind for the jury pool to suggest, is this coincidental? Maybe one, but 2, 3, 4, 5 different jigsaw puzzle pieces, all pointing to one particular suspect. You want to bring that out in great detail. Now, the most important one, perhaps, is that handwritten manifesto of sorts that speaks to not only motive, of course, but speaks to why it can be linking him directly. Also, the idea of the gun being in his possession, a similar license that was used allegedly for the hostel. All of these trails, they did not run cold, even though for 5 days he eluded captivity. Now you're talking about it all coming together. And for the prosecution, this is really an embarrassment of riches. But the defense still is right to try to make sure they prove their case, even right now, before you've got the official trial beginning.
And Laura, let me follow up with you. Do you expect Mangione to be federally charged? And would that represent a New York case?
He very well could be. Again, the idea of planning in another state or using another state's resources or being in a different jurisdiction, trying to commit a crime, planning or otherwise. He has had cases, of course, in Pennsylvania in the sense of not actual criminal charges, but instances where the cops were able to suggest that he had fraudulent documents or otherwise. That could be used. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a contest in some respects between the prosecutors in New York who want their homicide suspect brought to where they are to try to make it right in their jurisdiction. But the feds could very well act as a backdrop in the event that there are federal charges that are brought. But normally the homicide would govern, and it seems that that's the priority charge.
Certainly is. And John, is Mangione's decision to fight extradition to New York more about the charges against him or his possible treatment in a New York City prison?
I think it's a combination of both. He has hired a local lawyer who is near that courthouse. Fighting extradition or not waiving extradition gives him more time and proximity to his newly hired attorney. But as you point out, the choice of being in the Blair County, Pennsylvania jail versus New York's Rikers Island, which has a reputation of being a very unpleasant and somewhat dangerous place, is probably a smart pick for a kid who comes from a wealthy family who's in a high-profile case.
Yeah, good point.
And Danny, what is the latest that you're learning there?
Well, Aaron, first off, what a different tone tonight at the Blair County Courthouse compared to what we witnessed last evening over there. It was just stunning to see Luigi Mangione, as you played, screaming and yelling as he went from that squad car into the courthouse. But CNN also learned in the past hour and a half or so that his new defense attorney, during that all-important extradition hearing earlier this afternoon, actually told him to keep quiet during that appearance in front of that judge. But Aaron, there's just still so many unanswered questions right now about this case, even with Mangione in custody. So we went back to try and understand better his roots. We came right here to where he went to college. Years before he'd be escorted into a Pennsylvania courthouse, Luigi Mangione spent time more than 200 miles east, here at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. The prestigious Ivy League university confirming Mangione graduated on May 18, 2020, with a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering. That means he likely spent much of his time here at the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Now, while there weren't a lot of people who knew him or were willing to speak to us about him on camera, at least one student said that he was a TA of Computer and Information Sciences. Also, in a since-taken-down post for the university's Penn Today, Mangione was featured for leading a 60-student club that made video games. Quote, "I wanted to make my own game, and so I learned how to code," Mangione told a university writer.
He was a member of the Honor Society Engineering School, which is only for the top students in the class. He was involved in a fraternity on campus.
UPenn student newspaper editor-in-chief Jared Mitovich said his team has been working to see if there were any signs then of what was to come.
What was the type of education he received at Penn? Is Penn the type of place where he would have learned how to 3D print? Is it the type of place where he, was exposed to, certain beliefs just in like the groups that he ran into or like the things that he was involved in?
Mangione grew up in a wealthy family from Baltimore. According to the Baltimore Sun, his grandfather, Nicholas Mangione, built a local real estate empire that included nursing home facilities around Maryland and 2 suburban country clubs. In a statement released by Mangione's cousin, Maryland State Delegate Nino Mangione, his family said they were shocked and devastated by Luigi's arrest. At his arraignment Monday night, Mangione told the judge he had been in contact with his family, quote, until recently.
It's been an incredible journey.
Mangione graduated valedictorian in 2016 from Baltimore's prestigious all-boys The Gilman School. Former classmates couldn't believe he was now this suspect.
I can tell you that this is one of the last people you'd think would do something like this.
In recent years, according to a friend in online postings, though, Mangione suffered from back pain and underwent surgery to treat it. A Reddit user matching his biographical details writing in July 2023, "My back and hips locked up after the accident. Intermittent numbness has become constant. I'm terrified of the implications." But after maintaining a social media presence for years, Mangione went quiet this past summer and appeared to stop communicating with his family. Also notable, Aaron, as Mangione started to fade from his online presence, people noticed at least one ex-user tweeting at him saying, "I haven't heard from you in months." Another in late November, just before the shooting, posting, "Thinking of you and prayers every day in your name. Know that you are missed and loved." And Aaron, I'll note that the University of Pennsylvania declined to comment further for this story. Aaron?
Danny, thank you very much. So Tim Clemente is here now, former FBI counterterrorism agent, Mary Ellen O'Toole, senior profiler for the FBI, and Mark O'Mara, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Tim, can I start with you? I just want to play again that outburst because, often when you see a suspect like this, there's a stone-faced would be the way you describe them. This couldn't have been more the opposite of that. Luigi Mangione right outside court today. Here he is.
And completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and lived experience.
Look, Tim, it's disturbing to watch that. What he says, we had it written on the bottom of the screen, but just in case anyone's just listening, it's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people. It's lived experience. You hear him shout, and he sounds distressed. He's fighting against police as he does that. What do you make of this?
This is him showing himself, showing what he cares about, which is himself, obviously. I mean, he's not distraught, not going in there with his head held low, not going in there like he's embarrassed by this. This is his moment. And apparently in the last 5 or 6 days, he's probably looked at a lot of social media and seen how many adulating fans he has around the world that are saying he's a hero, these mistaken, misguided people that are trying to say what he did was good. I mean, he committed a cold-blooded murder, obviously planned it for some time, and now he's basking in the limelight. This is his moment, his 15 minutes of fame, and he's taking all the advantage he can out of it.
Mary Ellen, there was also a photo taken during those moments in the hearing. And as I described this, the rage is palpable. The sneer, the rage from his eyes, from his expression, the sneer on his face, his mouth. And we also have the mugshot. Now, this is just a straight stare. But when you look at him in these photos and when you see that outburst, that rage in that still photo, what do you see, Mary Ellen?
Well, there are definitely signs of rage and anger, but here's the conundrum. you have to really look at what his behavior was like. For example, in the car pulling up there before they got him out of the car, was he cool, calm, and collected? So then he gets out of the car, and then he immediately has this outburst. So was that brought about by the fact that the cameras are on, the media was there, and it immediately put him into the role of wanting a lot of attention? And you have to consider that before you rule it one way or the other. I've seen a lot of offenders, when they go to court, they will act up because it is their time to get that attention, to get that notoriety. The other thing that I look at with him is this: if he was so quick to anger like that, there's an absence of any kind of reports of him getting in fights with people, of him even being arrested by the police for this quick temper. So something is causing this, and it's important that, and investigators they'll go back to take a look at, is there something medically, is there something mentally, to better understand what's going on with him.
So, Mark, what's interesting in terms of if this was him trying to seize the moment and control the narrative and have his moment in front of the cameras, when he was in court today with his lawyer, and so he's, just met this lawyer, right? His lawyer has admitted that he told his client at one point to be quiet and not talk, and then also said this about Mangione.
This is not just a small thing. The fundamental concept of American justice is the presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And I've seen zero evidence at this point.
What do you think of that, Mark?
First of all, just zero evidence, okay, because nothing has come out yet. I would probably be a bit more circumspect about saying it because we know some of the evidence is out there. This case is going to run two tracks. One track is the forensic evidence. Did he do it from an evidentiary standpoint? It's going to be very strong because our digital evidence is so strong in cases like this, from cameras to the cell phones themselves. But the other part of it is the mental health mitigation. If they can prove he did it, then the question is why? And I see in those outbursts and his actions, I see nuggets of mental health mitigation coming out to the forefront. And everything has been consistent for 6 months or more, from the coming off social media, stopping conversations with his family and friends, some bizarre behaviors that we've seen. All of that, I think, is going to show itself as a beginnings of a mental health defense to not did he do it, but why.
Right. Okay. Which could be crucial. So, Tim, to this point, Mangione's mother, according to the New York Times, reportedly filed a missing persons report for him in San Francisco, on November 18th. That was just 2 weeks before the shooting. Now, as Mark's pointing out, we know that Mangione stopped communicating with family and friends about 6 months ago. So that timing may make this even more mysterious, right? Nobody reports him missing, as we understand it at this point, for 6 months until 2 weeks before the actual shooting. And it also brings into context this. And does everyone remember this image right here of him on the phone? That's just a few minutes before Brian Thompson walks down the street, Tim, and is allegedly killed by Mangione. He's on his cell phone, and he's talking to someone. So now we know he really cut off contact with everyone. It makes that call perhaps even more important. Who do you think he may have been talking to?
Well, Aaron, it's a guess on my part, but I would think that somebody might have been helping him locate Thompson and time Thompson's arrival to the hotel for the convention. And so it could have been something innocent and inadvertent, like talking to a doorman at the hotel that Thompson was staying at, making a plea. Hey, I sent my resume to United Healthcare, and I'm really hoping to meet the CEO today at the investors conference. Can you just let me know when he's arriving? Maybe I can bump into him in the lobby or something. And you do something like that and say, hey, here's my number. Call me if you find out when he's leaving the hotel. Or it could be, there's a possibility of accomplices. He wrote in his mini manifesto that to the feds that he acted alone, but that doesn't mean he's telling the truth. But I think there's a possibility that he was gaining intelligence, and that phone call had something to do with that, because the close proximity to the time and place of the killing is very important. And it's a call that I'm sure NYPD and the FBI are tracking down in every way they can.
And Mark, I know you think that call is crucial too now.
I think it's crucial for a couple reasons. I think, look, when you plan on shooting somebody, if that was true, you also probably plan on getting shot yourself. I think that phone call may have been saying goodbye to somebody whether it's a mother, a friend, whatever. Could have been a co-conspirator cohort. I grant you that, but I think it's going to be significant because of who he was possibly saying goodbye to more than anything else.